Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, my 5 takeaway series covering 5 Dynasty topics. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's go. So, yeah, I mean, there's no other way to start today's episode other than talking about Quinshon Judkins, his arrest, and that whole situation. So, I'll break it down for anyone who hasn't seen. And we'll have to get into that. So Judkins was arrested on Saturday on a misdemeanor domestic violence charge of delayed battery. What that means is that the incident occurred on July 7th, but wasn't reported until later. So that's why it's called delayed battery. And there's quite a bit of public information actually available now. I'm not obviously a lawyer or a legal expert, but there is a lot of publicly available information. So Judkins was released on a $2,500 bond yesterday. The judge ordered no contact with victim, no firearm access. And, those are pretty standard apparently in these types of cases. But what I think more actionable from the NFL perspective, which is what's going to matter, is the arrest report, which came out today. And it contained some very damning information. There were some things that were not very concerning to me. So there were apparently punches to the chin, the lip area, also left arm and thigh. And there was some other information about exactly how the incident occurred. But the real actionable thing is that the victim in this case wants to proceed with a prosecution. She wants to proceed with a prosecution. So what does that mean? That means that a prosecution is going to happen. And that is a problem for Judkins because there's two reasons why it's a problem. Number one, how the NFL legal system works. The NFL legal system requires much less proof than a criminal trial and is entirely controlled by the NFL. I have no idea how the criminal process is going to go. Criminal trials are meant to let 100 guilty people go free if it keeps one innocent person out of jail. There's defense attorneys, independent investigators, prosecutors, judges. It's an adversarial system. There's a lot more going on. And the burden of proof is very high. The NFL legal system doesn't work that way. In the NFL legal system, the NFL investigates the case. Then they're the prosecutor. They're also the judge. They also rule on the case. And if you don't like the judge's decision, you can appeal to the commissioner who oversees the entire process and is also the NFL and represents the owners. So whatever the NFL wants the outcome to be, it will be. And in this case, they can and will use the exempt list to keep Judkins off the field. I'm telling you, this is what's going to happen. Why? Because the allegations are too severe. They're too severe. The NFL did this last year with Brown's second-round pick, Michael Hall, who also had domestic violence allegations. You are put on the exempt list, and you're paid, but you cannot do anything. Any football activities, you are essentially not a part of the team until you come back. I don't know how that works with Judkins not signing his rookie contract. That's such a separate issue that I'm not really going to cover it. But regardless, the exempt list. I expect Judkins to be on the exempt list. He's not going to play until this legal case is done. It will need to be finished before he plays. Now, when it comes to Judkins' punishment, I haven't heard this talked about a lot, but it's my opinion. This is more of an opinion. Everything up until here, there's a lot of facts and a lot of precedent to talk about it. This last part is more of my opinion. The Browns as a franchise are a repeat violator of the NFL's policies and guidelines. Many, many violations. And they're currently in hot water with the NFL for a lot of other reasons. They're more likely to receive the maximum punishment. The NFL is not consistent with anything, any punishments, anything. It's all about optics. It's all about, other things. So the Browns Deshaun Watson contract is responsible for a collusion case that's currently proceeding against the NFL, where they're being sued for colluding to limit guaranteed money. It just came out recently. The Browns also had a domestic violence issue earlier this offseason with Devin Bush and last year with Mike Hall. That doesn't even get into Watson's suspension, which was incredibly embarrassing for the NFL. So if there's any franchise where the NFL will make an example of them, it's this one. It is this one. Can I be honest? Brutally honest? If Quinshon Judkins were a Chief, would he probably be suspended for fewer games? Yes. Is that fair? No. But that's the reality of how this works. The NFL's discipline process is not and has never been fair. It's always about optics and about that type of thing. And the Browns' optics are very bad because of all of the other violations and issues that have occurred with the Browns. So what do you do for Dynasty? Nothing. There's nothing to do. I saw some people yesterday, and this really bothered me, saying buy low on Judkins. I just don't see the need. I don't see the need. I'm a very good Dynasty manager, right? This isn't necessary. It's not necessary to buy into these types of spots. I don't prefer to make trades in these situations, especially without all of the information like we did not have yesterday, either buying or selling. This one is no different. I will say Judkins is a running back. Running backs' careers are shorter. They're more fickle. And Judkins has proven nothing, and he hasn't even signed his rookie contract. So he's not going to get as much slack from this team as a proven star veteran would, say Alvin Kamara, or even more so, a wide receiver like Rashee Rice. Wide receivers have longer careers. There's more of them who play. There's more opportunity, and they're higher paid. So getting a wide receiver, teams are so desperate for wide receivers, whereas for running backs, they can just find another running back. So I'm a little nervous. But with that being said, we have no idea how long the suspension is going to be. We have no idea how long Judkins is going to miss. I can tell you 0 games is not possible anymore. Not with the details that we saw today. He's going to go on the exempt list, and then a suspension is going to happen. So it's not 0. I don't know what it's going to be. We don't have enough information. We have to see how the process goes. But with that being said, I think I've talked about this enough. If you drafted Judkins in your Dynasty League, it's an unlucky break. But I'm not getting into this situation. I don't want more shares. I'm not interested. I'm just not interested. For a wide receiver, I might have different advice, but for a running back, I'll just pass. I'll pass, and I'll let someone else draft Judkins in Dynasty. I'll let someone else draft Judkins. If you're playing redraft, I'll just draft someone else. So I think that's my full take on Judkins. I know this was a very long segment, but I'm going to move on to my next segment, which is kind of related. I want to save the discussion really of Judkins' play on the field. I didn't talk about his rookie profile, all of that. We'll talk about that in another video when we actually have a suspension. But I do think we have to talk about the other running backs on the Browns, because Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford did not do anything wrong. They didn't choose to be in this situation. They're professionals. These are professionals. If and when Judkins misses time, these are the other running backs. They will have an opportunity to play. That's what's going to happen. So we have to look at what may happen in that case, right? I mean, there's no choice. So we'll start with Sampson. He didn't do much in his true freshman season in 2022 at Tennessee, but in 2023 got involved. 106 carries, 604 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5.7 yards a carry, and 17 catches, 175 yards and a touchdown. Back up to Jalen Wright. He looked pretty good efficiency there. And then 2024, he broke out after Wright came to the NFL. 258 carries, 1,491 yards, 22 touchdowns, 5.8 yards a carry, and 20 catches for 143 yards. He crushed it. Became a workhorse, averaging 114.7 yards a game. Maintained his same efficiency despite a volume increase. And he only turned 20 in September. So he did this in his full age 20 season. So he doesn't even turn 21 until September. The Browns spent a 4th-round pick on Sampson. I honestly thought he'd be a round 3 pick. I really liked him as a prospect, I will say. But I think it was pretty clear. 4th-round pick typically is a backup. The Browns' plan was to develop Sampson to take over as the RB2 behind Judkins after Ford walked in free agency after 2025. And this was despite Ford playing well last year. Ford last year, 14 games, 104 carries, 565 yards, 3 touchdowns, 5.4 yards carry, and 37 catches for 225 yards. I mean, he was a fill-in starter for Nick Chubb when Chubb didn't come back in time from his injury to start the season. And over those first 5 weeks when he was the clear starter, he averaged 50 rushing yards and 17.4 receiving yards a game. Decent production, 67 yards a game. I mean, he was a decent player, had some efficiency. But I think it's clear what the Browns thought about him, and it's not much because they drafted not 1, but 2 running backs and forced him to take a pay cut on an already low salary to come back for the final year of his contract. So clearly Jerome Ford was not a big part of their plan. Now, what is the actionable move here? For me, it's consider selling both of these players high. Now, it's a question of what's high, right? So for Ford, I'd take a third and move on. He really had no value before this. He's just a guy. I'd rather have a third. I don't believe in Ford at all. As for Sampson, I'd try to get a second for him. I think if you can get a second and take the profit now, I would. Is Dylan Sampson really a 4th-round running back who was a good prospect, but not someone I'm super excited about on this Browns offense, really likely to be worth more than a second in the future? I'm going to lean toward no. So if I can get a second, I'd do it, but I'd probably try to get a 2026 second at least. Maybe you can get more. I mean, always ask for more, but I would consider selling these guys high. Usually running backs who get this type of temporary opportunity are almost always immediate sells for me. So I'm going to run through this real quick because I actually just discussed Jennings on my last video, but it came out today that Jauan Jennings wants an extension or a trade or a new contract of some kind. He is being paid $7.5 million this year. This is the final year of his deal. He wants an extension with more guaranteed money or more money this year. I don't know exactly what he wants, but he wants a different contract. And I can't blame him because he broke out in 2024. He's 28 years old, and this is his window to be paid. NFL careers are short. I understand why he wants to make this move now. I actually, like I said, I just discussed Jennings on my most recent Dynasty buy video. If you want to check out my thoughts on him, I talked about his advanced stats, his production in 2024, and why I thought he was a value again in 2025. So I'm not going to rehash all of that, especially with how long this video is going. But for me, I'm happy to hold Jennings if I have already shares. I'm not doing anything with those existing shares. I'm happy to buy him. I mean, his price is going to be dirt cheap. If there's even more of a value dip, I'm happy to buy even lower on Jauan Jennings. The 49ers and Jennings, I really feel like need each other in 2025. Demarcus Robinson is probably going to get suspended. Brandon Ayuk's not going to be ready to start the season. They don't have anyone else. They need Jauan Jennings to start the season. They can't trade Jauan Jennings away. They can't afford to do that. I think this gets resolved. My big hope is that it gets resolved sooner rather than later, because I know that these contract holdouts, if they go to the last minute, tend to affect players' production like it did with Brandon Ayuk last year. But even if that's the case, I'm still considering buying a dip on Jennings if the value is really, really cheap. And it's been really, really cheap all off season. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. I'm offering a 50% discount off your first month at all tiers using the code TylerYT50. You can sign up in the top right corner, patreon.com/fantasy advice. Type that code in. You'll get 50% off your first month. You get my rankings, access to Discord, write-ups, Patreon-only videos, direct message fantasy advice, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. And I will say, with breaking news like happened this week with Quinshon Judkins and then this morning with Jauan Jennings, it's the type of thing that I'm only going to be covering in the Patreon Discord. That's where I have immediate discussion about immediate news. I don't do breaking news videos on the YouTube. I do the regular recording schedule. I record Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I don't record other videos. I don't do breaking news videos. So if you want my up-to-date, immediate take on everything in the NFL as it relates to Dynasty, the Patreon is the only place to get that. Tiers begin at just $5 a month, $250 with the discount. And if you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. I'm going to, I think, do another video very soon detailing more about what I'm offering on there. But again, TylerYT50, type that code in at checkout. You'll get 50% off your first month. I really, really would appreciate more people joining. I'm in there every day. I'm working my ass off every day to help your Dynasty teams. And I just would love to see more people on there. And with that said, I'll move into my next topic. So I know this has been a long video, so I'm going to run through these last couple of topics very quickly. I just wanted to discuss Drake Maye. I don't think I've even talked about him once this offseason. And I think it's because I'm right there with everyone else. Everyone is so in on the Maye breakout that he's not really a buy. But in that quarterback range in Superflex Dynasty leagues, I love them all value-wise. So he's definitely not a sell. So I wanted to just kind of give Maye a little bit of time on the channel. Last year in 13 games, 66.6% completion, 15 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 6.7 yards per attempt, and 54 carries, 421 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The problem with Maye is it's hard to evaluate him on a per game basis because he played as a backup in week 3, left week 8 very early, and then only played a few snaps in week 18. So the per game stats are a little wonky, but he had like no receiving weapons and some of the worst coaching I can imagine, and he was still decent. The Patriots made some big changes. They brought in Mike Vrabel as head coach, Josh McDaniels as offensive coordinator, and they overhauled their offensive weapons. They added Stephon Diggs, Trevion Henderson. Why did I write Stephon Diggs twice? And Matt Collins. I'm supposed to say Kyle Williams. They didn't lose anyone from 2024. So these additions were purely additive. Last year, you really legitimately had Quinshon Judkins. There we go. Kyle Williams is included now. You legitimately had Quinshon Judkins, Austin Hooper, Kendrick Bourne, and Jalen Polk taking snaps. This year, Hunter Henry, Demario Douglas are returning. You still have Ramondre Stevenson as a good backup, and then you'll have Trevion Henderson mixing in, Stephon Diggs as the wide receiver 1 whenever he's ready. And then I think, Kyle Williams will maybe be the outside wide receiver 2, but if not, could be Matt Collins or could be Quinshon Judkins as more of, a lower tier option. But essentially they've added a bunch of players and lost nobody. So I think they'll be better than they were last year, and they have better coaching. So for me, I expect a year 2 leap from Maye. Again, a part of the reason I haven't discussed Maye is because I'm right there with everyone else. I love his rushing upside for fantasy, accuracy he showed, despite having nothing to work with. Is Josh McDaniels my favorite offensive coordinator? No. Is Mike Vrabel my favorite coach for fantasy? No. But these are more minor concerns. I will say the weapons still aren't ideal. I do like Maye a lot more in a 4-point passing touchdown format, whereas rushing could carry him more. I'm still not confident he's got the receiving weapons to have a top-tier passing breakout in 2025. Could happen later in his career. But I do think the rushing for fantasy is what's going to carry him more right now. Could be a little bit like Dak Prescott, where the rushing was a big thing earlier in his career, and then he developed more as a passer as his career continued. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, Chris Godwin. Definitely a player I'm more on the selling side, but it's become tough to sell him because his value took a massive hit after the Buccaneers drafted Emeka Egbuka in the first round. Godwin was great last year. In 7 games, he had 50 catches, 576 yards, 5 touchdowns, 62 targets, 7.1 catches, and 82.3 yards a game. His career year, best year outside of 2019, top 3 fantasy wide receiver. And he was so elite that it basically held Mike Evans down. Mike Evans was doing nothing. All of Mike Evans' big production came down the stretch when Godwin was out. There was a lot of talk earlier in the year that nobody remembers about how Mike Evans was a total bust. So Godwin was elite, but the injury is pretty brutal. Now, Godwin signed a 3-year deal worth $66 million with $44 million guaranteed. And basically it's 2 years of guarantees. And that's what the Buccaneers must expect out of him. They must have been okay with his injury situation at the time off the ankle dislocation. There's no exceptions, no void provisions, no insurances, nothing in the deal for the ankle or any other injuries. So the Buccaneers are on the hook for the $44 million, no matter what, whether he recovers from the injury well or not. They're on the hook for the $44 million. It's all fully guaranteed. Now, for me, I'd consider selling Godwin before week 1. Everything I've heard from the injury experts, Dr. Deepak Chona, great one, I think, my favorite personally. They all say Godwin can probably play week 1, but he won't be 100%. And that is concerning because we know players are punished in value more when they play, but are disappointing and bad because people are starting them when maybe they shouldn't be, than when they don't play at all. See Isaiah Pacheco's 2024 return for that. An example of that value loss. I'm nervous. I'm nervous about the value of a 29-year-old coming off a serious injury if he underperforms out the gate. He's not 23 or 24. He's 29. So that just concerns me a little bit. And maybe I'd like to sell Godwin before I see any of that, if that's possible. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because the video's already been long, but there were a few Patreon questions, so I'm going to cover those. What are the types of moves that are most likely to be successful in the dead season between rookie drafts and the start of the season? I find that most of my leagues go dead during that time. I can find that. Yeah, that does happen. I don't know. I mean, sometimes buying low on players that are kind of out of sight, out of mind. Continuing to do waivers if there's any news. Just being active, trying to come up with trades. But yeah, I do find that there's a little bit of a dead time in that period. And the main thing I do is just make sure I'm still doing waivers. And I still can sometimes try to sell players during that time. So I'm not often looking to buy. What type of positive buzz, hype, coach speak do you give weight to as we get into training camp? Is there any? Well, if I hear the same thing multiple times, that helps. Not just once, multiple times. Like if it's constant drumbeat, this player's great, this player's great, this player's great. That would help. Although I will say I tend to weight anything negative a lot more than anything positive. Coaches like to be positive about everyone. That's not shocking. But if they're ever saying anything negative, if we're ever hearing anything bad, that is usually weighted very heavily, much more so than anything positive. But in terms of teasing out exactly what is good and what is bad, or what matters more, that's hard to do. There's no rhyme or reason to it specifically. It depends on the coach. But yeah, if it's said more often, I'm more likely to give it more weight. What are non-fantasy sports things you can research or read to get better at Dynasty? Oh, that's a good question. Anything about how to negotiate. Don't negotiate against yourself. A book about patience would be nice. You could read a book about patience. That would definitely help. Dynasty managers are very impatient. Yeah. I would also say anything about like creating leverage in spots. Like, why is it better to wait until you're on the clock until you trade the rookie picks? Well, it's because the person getting what you're selling gets to realize the exciting thing right away. They don't have to wait. So, but in terms of like, other than those types of things, those are the main things that I would say. Obviously, just yeah, it helps you more with trading and stuff like that. Oh, and don't be lazy. But you don't need a book to tell you that, right? Okay, last one. As we approach redraft season and dynasty managers beginning to focus more on lineups and fantasy points more than the past, what is one stat or metric that gets used very often in fantasy football analysis that managers tend to overvalue, place too much trust in? Sure, it's fantasy points. It's fantasy points. Fantasy points are not the best predictor of future fantasy points. They're not bad. I mean, they're relevant, but they're not the best predictor because fantasy points are largely weighted on touchdowns, which are the most random stat of all. So, yeah, I mean, you have to look beyond fantasy points. Obviously, the really, really good players are really good for a reason. But if we have, two players who finished around the wide receiver 30, and one of them did it on targets, and the other did it because they scored 13 touchdowns on very few receptions, like Mark Andrews or whatever. This is an example of someone who had a very high touchdown rate. Yeah. So as we get to the season, I think people just say fantasy points is everything and they don't look at the other stuff. So that would be the stat I think is the most over-relied on. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to support the channel by subscribing and don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, is available on the Patreon. Dynasty and other fantasy football content year-round. I've got my redraft ranks on there, and start sit will be during the season. You get a 50% discount at all tiers using code TylerYT50. Sign up in the top right corner, patreon.com/fantasy advice. Every sign up helps support my independent fantasy football content. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.